Welcome to IronCast, the official IronCAD podcast about all things CAD. IronCAD is a leading provider of innovative 3D design solutions trusted by design engineers across industries like machinery, equipment, and modular manufacturing to help streamline their workflows. I'm Mufarum Shashi, a product marketing engineer at IronCAD.
And I'm Cary Williams, a product application engineer at IronCAD. And today we'll go through a few topics, learning about how we got here, who we are, kind of taking a journey to see what IronCAD is all about. So Rafara, you can let us know what we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Real quick though, just wanted to make some quick announcements in case you haven't seen it, in case you missed it in the emails. We have the basic certification that's available now. You can take that, enroll that in that. Make sure that your IronCAD skills are up to par. And yeah, just do a bit of fun design questions in there.
Yes, indeed. I spent some time personally in IronCAD within this past year, and I can tell you say it's very, very good. A lot of improvements with this new 2025 release. Of course, IronCAD in its entirety is good. A version is also good, but 2025 especially has a lot of new features that we really can use and really enhance how we even do CAD in the day-to-day processes.
Right. So let's get into it, right, Mikhail? So what is IronCAD? Because we have the IronCAD product and then which is made by IronCAD, the company, but we're going to talk about the IronCAD, the company a little bit later down the line when we have a special guest with us.
Yes.
That we're excited to have.
Very, very excited.
But IronCAD, the product, is a 2D and 3D computer-aided design or CAD software, mostly used in engineering industries and applications. What's great about IronCAD, one of the main selling points that I really love is that you begin your designing in 3D. You don't have to, do your sketches and then extrude and all that kind of stuff that can, really gum up the process of designing. But yeah, that's one of the things that I love about IronCAD is the ease of learning.
Yeah, it's very simple, actually. I learned IronCAD in about 2 weeks when I first got into it. Even coming from a SolidWorks background, it's a more natural way of how you can design. Really being able to see in your brain in 3D, but also designing it in 3D.
Right.
So it's more like you can drag and drop from different catalogs, being able to adjust. If you already have something that you already pre-designed, you could just take that and put it in there as well without having to start from scratch. And so it's a more natural way of how you can fully design what's in your heart, what's in your mind.
That's great. And you mentioned catalogs. We absolutely have to talk about those really quickly. Catalogs are basically libraries of predefined shapes or user-defined that things that you've designed on your own and put into these libraries. And you can literally just go in, drag your spheres, your boxes, your engines that you've made. I know you've made some engines in your in IronCAD 2025, Makai.
Mm.
And you basically can just drag those things out from the library, plop it onto your scene, which is just the word that we use for the design environment. And, you continue on your design like that.
Yeah, it's really that simple in a way. It's actually really, really that simple. The biggest thing that I can say, of course, yes, you can put some things together, drag from the catalog, but I think with SolidWorks, there's a lot of different ways you have to constrain, change when it comes to designing, when it comes to the sketching, they're even doing the 3D models. But in IronCAD, they have something called a tri-ball. This is actually my favorite things. It's my favorite things because it's literally everything you need in one tool. You click a button, you can, change the orientation of something, you can rotate it, you can copy it. Also linking the copy. It's a lot of different things you can do with the tri-ball, and it's really amazing. Of course, and, as we go through each episode, we'll have more features we can talk about, but I think for myself, that's my favorite thing I've ever seen in my entire life, especially as an engineer.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you. Tribal is definitely it's a multi-use, multi-purpose tool that's very intuitive and it just makes the design process go by so fast. So we mentioned earlier that we're going to have a special guest on, and we have Cary O'Connor, who is the Senior Vice President of Product and Strategy at IronCAD. We're so excited to have you on, Cary. Welcome to IronCast.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
It's so great to have you on. When we were talking about coming up with the idea of IronCast, we were thinking about people who would have a wealth of knowledge and that would be able to speak to the product from the perspective of a user, like a power user, as well as from the perspective of like the company and everything that it stands for. So
Mhm.
we're really, really glad that you have time to join us today. So if you could give us a brief history of the company IronCAD, yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. Yeah, I'll give you a history, and hopefully it doesn't give away my age much. But yes, I've been with IronCAD a very long time, and IronCAD's a very mature product. It started back, the early concepts of IronCAD really happened probably pre 1995, out of actually a school, Cornell University, a group of developers, uh, I guess computer science majors started the product, and then took it into what we call a product called Trispectives. So it launched in 1995 as a product called Trispectives, and it was really a new thing for the industry at the time. It was really 3D for everybody uh, on Windows. So at the time, if you think back, way back in 1995, you have Windows 95, Windows 98, those type of platforms were coming out. And so they were one of the first applications that really developed a Windows 3D design application.
Right.
And it was all centered around, it was built for anybody. Push and pull handles, drag and drop, and had kept the construct of what you mentioned earlier, the catalogs. All that environments was developed in Trispectives, and it built onto those catalogs to add additional components like just furniture components and things that you see today on Thingiverse and other things where you can all these components. We have catalogs, all that type of content that was developed back in 1995 on Trispectives. From there, the product really was geared to continue to grow for a 3D for everybody, but the market wasn't really built for it. Another group of people came on board from a company called Visionary Design Systems. They were actually working through Hewlett Packard with CAD systems and data management systems. They picked up Trispectives and actually turned it into the product, what you call today as IronCAD.
Wow.
Relaunched it in 1998 as a true mechanical CAD tool for engineers. So that's the very, early history of IronCAD, starting off from a 3D for anybody, taking those basic foundations and, all the things that you're mentioning from the tri-ball. There was a very beginning part of the tri-ball back then. It had the tri-ball, the drag and drop, all that stuff was really developed early on, really for that ease of use, coming into the system, learning something anybody can design. It doesn't have to be an engineer, using high-end CAD systems, because back in the day, in 1995 and in 98, if you recall, I think 95 was probably the heyday of Pro Engineer, which is a really big CAD system, one of the big first parametric CAD systems that were out there. SolidWorks was launching in 1998, 1995, as well as the same time as Trispectives, which kind of an interesting story. At the launch time, a lot of the best-in-class events that happened at the trade shows, Trispectives won a lot of those awards at the same time just launching. So, but anyway, so it was just kind of a difference of the way you work. SolidWorks can, they were one of the first CAD systems, if you will, on Windows platforms. But it was just it was taking the same construct that Pro Engineer had developed, the really structured design, and just moved it into the Windows platform, brought the cost down of the CAD systems, and it was kind of the launching of the revolution of the, I guess, your mid-range CAD market, if you will. So SolidWorks was initially there on the platform at 1995, 1998. IronCAD officially launched and challenged that platform as well.
Wow.
Wow.
That's very interesting. It sounds like IronCAD has a history of collecting the brightest of minds. And
That they touch a little bit of everything.
yeah. And so kind of in that vein of thinking, how did you become involved in IronCAD, and what was your journey to becoming one of IronCAD's pillars?
Yeah, it's for me, I actually came directly out of school into the company Visionary Design Systems. I picked up IronCAD. So during my school, I was at Purdue University, mechanical engineering. I've looked at the CAD systems. I was really kind of using the CAD systems quite a lot in my senior design projects and things like that. I remember, SolidWorks people walking the halls. And Pro Engineer was used in a lot of classrooms at the time. So I kind of learned on Pro Engineer. So I knew the foundations of the product, how it works, how the sketch environments, the data planes, everything to design in that process. And that's where I built my foundation. And then, Visionary Design Systems, when I interviewed them, and they kind of showed me a precursor to IronCAD at that time. So there was a intermediate product in there, but they kind of showed me the precursor of the transition from Trispectives to IronCAD. I saw that product and I said, oh, yeah, that's where I want to go. So I joined the company in 1998, prior to the launch. I think the launch was actually, let me think back. I think that was in maybe September it was called INDES, National Design and Engineering Show in 1998 is where they launched. So I joined January that year. So I started with the company then. Worked on some of the products, including the data management system that they had at the time. But the owner was also from Purdue, and he was really adamant that he wanted me on the IronCAD team. And so I moved back down to the IronCAD team and was there on the launch and preparation of the launch, and been there ever since. So that's kind of where I fell in love with the product, was just kind of seeing how it works and how easy it was to come on board. Because of from my background, we were doing really complicated loft. Surface loft products in my senior design. And if you try to do that with data planes and how to orient those, change the data plane origins, it's not easy. It's a kind of a nightmare if you think about it in those systems. And and when I saw IronCAD, I could have done it in half the time easily. My senior design using IronCAD, just with the tribal, as you mentioned, because it's very easy just to move the planes, orient them where I needed them to be, and then loft right through there.
Wow.
So it was really an eye-opening event for me.
Wow. So it must be very intuitive, like software. So like, even coming from that background, it must have been something that, must have caught your eye in many ways, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of the big things, is really just, like you said, the intuitive interface. You guys mentioned all the points on those. So, it's kind of why I believed in the product, or initially fell in love with the product. Actually, it was just the way it was designed. It has that intuitive feel to it, but yet it's very powerful. Over the time, when it launched as IronCAD, we launched it as a innovative design application, and that's not just the intuitiveness of it, but using the catalogs, thinking in 3D, constructing elements, using precise drag and drop from the catalogs to points, to faces, to edges, using the tribal to create the geometry, as you mentioned, out of its positioning, but just using that to really build anything in 3D. But the beauty of it wasn't just a simple application. It has all the power there. Everything, that you are familiar with in traditional CAD systems, sketches, they're there. They're behind the scene. You can still access them. You still modify them, do more complex things with those constraints. Those are there. If you want to add constraint geometry, you use it where and when you need it. You're not forced to use it at everything that you do. It's when you need it and when it makes sense to use it.
Right.
If you want to get to the advanced structure design that can really get into really complex parametrics and mixing of 3D curves and 2D sketches and surfaces, multi-body, IronCAD has that as well. So it has the whole gamut of functionality. But IronCAD's always presented as like, yes, you can do those things, and there's a place for them. There's a lot of things that those other systems don't do very well. Want to get into conceptual design, when you want to do modular products, want to do bespoke designs, IronCAD excels at that. That's a lot of your work or day-to-day work that you're trying to do. IronCAD is something you really need to look at.
That's great. Yeah, and you touched on one of what was going to be the next question of why do you believe in the product? But let's explore that a little bit further, right? What do you see as the biggest difference between IronCAD's origin story and other CAD solutions in the industry, and what makes you think of IronCAD over those other programs?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, just kind of talk to the point of how I see it different than the other systems. I really classify most of the other products in the industry as traditional structured CAD systems. They start with a 2D sketch or start with a datum plane. They add your sketch, extrude, bend, sweep, loft into some sort of 3D geometry, and you repeat the process. You add your constraints along the way to make sure things move the way you want. They typically talk about a design intent. So you have to really think about what you're trying to design at the end, so that you could build and construct your model to meet that design intent. One of the things that's always been a problem in the industry is like the design intent is different between what I think is the design intent for a product and what you think it is. So, it's twofold. One, if I design something to my design intent, and I give it to someone else to either modify or continue to design on, either they can't figure it out, they had to restart, or you really spend a lot of time to figure out how you built it so that you can continue to make modifications. Because there's always this one thing that was always there when we launched our product. People call it about this, we call it the red tree of death. Basically, when you go and try to modify something that's built in structure design, if you modify something, feature 5 or 6 in a tree of 80 different features, it ripples through. If you make a modification and it breaks some sort of relationship that you've had in that structure, it breaks everything. So you have to go through and fix everything that gets impacted by that change. So it's very difficult, very time consuming. And that was one of the key things that IronCAD, when it launched, is like, that was one of the kind of the pillars of the pain point, is like, you don't need to worry about that, history, that rigid history structure. IronCAD has it. We're not a direct only CAD system, which there are a few out there that just have no history base. There is a value of history. So you want features, you want history, but you don't have to be bound by that history. IronCAD's even intelligent enough to actually make changes for you, make the order changes for you to give you a predictable result, which traditional CAD systems can't do. There's very simple cases we can, all of us here can demonstrate it. Any of our resellers can demonstrate the very simple case of, making it, four features in a tree, moving feature 3 after feature 4. It either fails or doesn't show in the geometries because it's referring to something else.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
IronCAD doesn't matter. It knows that you're trying to move something out there. If there's geometry there, it's going to reorder the tree to give you a predictable result. It's like rip a hole from one feature to another feature. The hole is still a hole.
Right.
Okay, so it's kind of intelligence there. So that's what made it very easy. And when we talk about the intuitiveness of IronCAD, it's not just the UI, the interface that you're experiencing. It's actually the underlying system. It makes those intelligence changes for you.
Right.
Again, so that's kind of the one thing that I think is very easy to explain to people, the kind of the differences of IronCAD. Because when you look at CAD, it's been around for 20-something plus years. And, that we all can create geometry. It's just, how fast can you create the geometry and what's the purpose of what you're creating, right? So in IronCAD, we have a, specific markets, and we'll talk about a little later what markets we target, but, we excel at certain things. And, looking at those traditional CAD systems, they try to build themselves as, a one size fit all. And it doesn't work very well for some people.
Oh, yeah.
If you're really always building custom design parts, or equipment machinery, that's going to be a different machine each time, but you might want to reuse some components here and there, but you're constantly making changes to that. Those systems are not really geared to do that. They like to be parametric. That's why you're building this whole design instance, so that if I make a few parameter changes or something like that, I could change the overall size, or I can change specs on certain motors or whatever that's in there based on these parameters. I can drive all that stuff. But if I'm really saying, well, that motor doesn't go there, it needs to be moved over here because we have some of the requirement. I need to move that entire assembly somewhere else. I need to get rid of these components and add some different components on. That complete, unknown that you're going to come into on a new design, that's where IronCAD excels. Whether it's just a single part or an assembly, which we are much better suited for assembly design. For people that's putting a bunch of assemblies together, moving those things around, that's where we really excel. You can see it in the part design, like I mentioned about the automatic feature reordering. But when you get into the actual assembly design, that's where you really start to see the differences of IronCAD.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I think that's what I also like about it a lot too, is because I grew up on SolidWorks. That's all I knew at one point. But even coming to IronCAD, I think the ability to change my design, adjust it without having to worry about, just because I change one, line sketch here, one dimension here, that the whole thing's not going to break apart. I think that flexibility within the software really, really does make it. I think even for myself, that's why I want to use IronCAD more, because it allows my brain to not have to use extra function to go back and see what I did wrong. How can I rechange this? But that intuitiveness of being able to be flexible and adjust, that's really, really something I really do enjoy a lot.
Yeah, flexibility is kind of unmatched. I think when you have like designs in your brain, you quickly can make those changes in your mind. But being able to translate those changes onto the screen is typically difficult, because you have the roadblocks of, well, is whatever I previously designed it in, is that going to communicate well with what I'm trying to design it in now?
Right.
Or is there whatever history-based connection that I'm going to disconnect and it's going to cause chaos everywhere.
Right.
I know that I've experienced that myself as a user. But moving on, Cary, who do you think that IronCAD is for? I know you kind of briefly touched on that as well, which you're doing a fantastic job of almost predicting what the next question is going to be and diving right into it. But yeah, who do you think that IronCAD is for? Who would benefit from it the most?
Mhm. Yeah, I guess I'll put it down. We kind of narrowed ourselves down to a couple, I guess, big industry segments. But now I'll talk about the actual users in those areas. But really, we focus on a lot of industrial equipment, machinery, manufacturing users, fabricators, tooling, designing, tool design. Those type of users. Those are very. They find our application very easy to use because they don't have to worry about a lot of the restrictions of traditional CAD systems. Is where those guys come in. When you're dealing with sheet metal components, we have a completely different sheet metal uh, behavior or process than the traditional CAD folks out there. So, a lot of people find that useful from the fabricator side. Uh, those are kind of really large segments, and inside of there, we kind of classify two other segments from those groups. One is people that are doing assembly layouts. So it could be assembly layout for actually designing the industrial equipment, machinery, or even laying out facilities. You have a large scale where you have a very large environment. You're putting in multiple machine components. You're putting structures inside of there. You're bringing in components from other applications. Uh, y- those type of users with the use of the tri-ball and our single scene environment where you don't have to have, multiple files for assemblies and parts all over the place where you have that data management. You don't have to worry about any of that. We have a single scene environment, bring it all into one document, move those things around, save things out you need to as external, but you don't have to do everything like that. So that single scene environment works really well for that assembly environment. That's kind of what I mentioned before. It's like it's a unique environment for these type of users that really had to deal with large scale assemblies. We're talking thousands of parts, not small thousands of parts, tens of thousands, 20,000, 30. It grows. That's where we scale in that assembly environment. The other one is really I think you mentioned it earlier, Rufaro, is basically the modular component manufacturers. So this is actually kind of a different environment. I don't think a lot of the CAD systems really target these users because it's not necessarily the design of those components. It's moving more into the sales orientation side of it, meaning that you're kind of designing to order.
I see.
Okay, so you have component projects or components that have intelligence that when you drag and drop, they know how to position themselves, they know how to orient themselves, they know how to even size. You can even give it even more details into systems where it can actually check ERP systems. Is this product even available or is it on back order? They could do a lot of things where they can just quickly build multiple components together, drag and drop, quickly build a product and get that information to multiple users. It can be in front of sales, can do it in front of customers to get product, to make sure they're designing it right. That's real geometry. It could be simplified for the sales, but it could be real connected to real geometry so they can actually go right into manufacturing of the real geometry. So that's a really unique marketplace that we go into, and it spans a lot of customers. You can get into trade show companies that are wanting to lay out different types of booths where they have catalogs of various different trade show components. It could be I have a table stand, this type of product line. I can mix it with a wall type component that's structured of many different things. They can build these catalogs of all these components and quickly construct it in an assembly environment in that sense.
Wow.
But those component manufacturers or this configuration of these components is really a unique thing for us, and we build a lot of intelligence around that to suit them. So it could be, it could be run in the background, but still, maybe call from like a website, for example. Someone can use this website environment where they can put in variables, not for just a simple product of changing variables and sizing something, but putting multiple components together. Or use, I have this type of motor, I have this type of frame, I have this type of something else, and I can grab all those things and intelligently put them together and move it through the design process to the engineering group and to manufacturing. Whereas most of your other CAD systems, whatever's doing it in the sell side is usually just kind of like concept sketches or very simple models, and they have to send it to engineering. They have to rebuild everything with the real data, which takes a lot of time, and then manufacture it. So we're cutting that entire process down using real design engineering data for different user types. And that goes back to The earlier things is intuitive interface.
Yes.
Talk to salespeople or pre-sales engineers. They're not CAD power users. They don't know the insides and outs of the CAD. They can't really use that in that type of environment. So them learning a high-end system or a high-end vid system, like that functionality is not really well suited for them to do that in front of a customer.
Yeah.
So that's why we have the IronCAD interface really is suited for that type of user, because that's what it was built on, that foundation for 3D for anyone. Then it goes into the engineering, which gives you, what we mentioned, it has both environments, an innovative environment, a structured environment. Really what we're talking about is what we call it's a versatile application. It gives you the engineers that want to get into the very depths of building very complex structures. You've got that capability. You want to do quick concepts, bespoke products, we've got that capability. And we also have, the mix of the two. We're using both of them. It's not just two different environments. They mix, they interchange. You can have, in one assembly, you can have multiple different types of parts for various reasons. So that's kind of that versatile capability that we're speaking to.
Wow.
It seems like one of the, two main things that I picked up from what you said were, one, that the communication aspect between, sales, engineers, customers, all of that is kind of optimized because they don't have to go through the process of being like, oh, we want to make this small change here. Let me take this back to somebody, to the engineer that created it, and then they can, make the modifications and bring it back over. I think that's like a very big thing that that when I picked up on it, I was like, oh, that's something that's useful. CAD for everyone. It lowers the barrier to entry to CAD. And I guess maybe that's the second part of what I'm trying to say, is that having a CAD system that you can get into directly and start designing the things that are in your mind without having to go through a bazillion, tutorials made by other people who, are power users and already have all the jargon, and it can kind of confuse you and whatnot. I think having CAD for everyone, CAD that has a lower barrier to entry, makes it so that people can get started on what's important to them, which is, here's my design, here's the idea, here's the innovation. It's not just engineers that innovate. It can be anybody that innovates. It can be a salesperson that has a great idea for a design modification. And I think that's a really impressive feature.
Yeah, to kind of speak to what you're saying there is, a lot of things that we see IronCAD being used for is actually in that, like you said, that sales environment, when you're going in and actually trying to quote someone a product. You can imagine someone trying to take SolidWorks or Pro Engineer and to have a customer and say, oh, this is our product that we want to create. Hold on, when we build this, as I build sketches and data planes and everything else, trying to build something is just not feasible. So most people still use a sketch, right? They just draw a piece of paper. This is my model. This is how I want to connect. This is pieces that I need. They're drawing on a piece of paper, or they're looking at images on people's website of various products. Well, I need that product, this product, to put together to do something. A lot of our customers will actually take a laptop into the environment. They've got their catalog of their components. They sit there, drag and drop and build it right there. It's real data. Wow. So, they're taking it in the concept stage of building something, and they say, okay, yeah, that's what I want. Even can you tweak this and this? Yeah, we either make the change there. They can go back and make the change right there in engineering, but it's still the real data. They don't have to start from scratch again. Whatever you drew on your little piece of paper, someone has to build it in the CAD system.
Right.
But if you're using IronCAD to construct this with all your components, you can take that and make your final tweaks. Basically, what it boils down to, you're just reducing that overall production time. You're winning bits basically that way, because you can actually visualize and conceptualize what you're doing.
Yeah.
Taking that and say production side is going to be reduced. So I can say from a customer, I say, hey, here, this is what you want. Yes, I visually see it. I can reduce it. I can deliver it to you then. It's hard for other companies to compete in that fashion. They have to take that longer approach, like you said.
Yeah.
You have to talk about something, rebuild it, send it back. Oh, that's not quite right. Send it back to the engineer and make a change. If the engineer's got time to do that, make that change, send it back. You're a lot of repetitive processes that way. Even with today's technology of doing go-to meetings and screen sharing, that still does not solve that problem. You have to have a system that any user can use, because you're not always going to have engineers' times. You need a pre-sales engineer or even a salesperson, someone that can actually see the components, understand how to actually use it, visually.
Yeah.
That's why IronCAD is so visual, is to drag and drop, allow them to do that.
Wow. It seems like it's like you can just like on the spot just create something or create a product. You literally can just bring your laptop, bring IronCAD literally wherever you go, and you just with your brain and your eyes, you could just put everything together. Yeah, put it on the screen.
I've literally like made like it's been faster for me to make a logo in IronCAD than it was for me to like use a graphic design software to go in and like try to make all these changes and tweaks and
Oh wow.
all that kind of stuff. It was literally easier for me to just go into IronCAD, make an I-beam, stretch it out, do all the stuff that I needed to do to it, and it took me like 5 minutes to finish the design. So, and that's me as someone who's a product marketing engineer, not necessarily at the level of like, like applications engineer in terms of using IronCAD, but still able to make something really quickly. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Oh yeah.
So what advice do you have for new users or people transitioning over to IronCAD from other softwares? We've mentioned that, a lot of the CAD softwares kind of got started around the same time. And so they've had about the same amount of time to get to where they are, but people still choose IronCAD over, a different software once they've had it in their hands for a little bit of time. What advice do you have for those new users? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of classify the new users, at least in my mind, as kind of two users, right? So one that's coming new to CAD. They may coming from maybe a 2D system or a graphics application, or, some of the other free things that are out there, and they're coming into a 3D true CAD system. Those type of users, a lot of times it's actually easier for those users to come into IronCAD because they're open-minded. They think, like, as Makai said, thinking in 3D, I have something visually in my mind. IronCAD really suits them to come in and say, I can start with a simple element, for example, a block and a cylinder. I can drag things out. You can see some of our videos from the past. People that are in middle school or elementary school can actually use IronCAD. They understand, I see something, I can drag and drop it out and start building something with it. And, that's kind of one of the powers of IronCAD. It's, it can go down into the really young engineers that really want to start using it. IronCAD works really well for that, and works really well for these users just coming to the application. So they think in 3D, they can actually start using it. But also for those new users, just keep in mind, IronCAD can grow with you. Like I said, it's a very versatile application. It's got a lot of power behind it. So you can use it for that conceptual design, the bespoke new products, but you can get really complex with it as well. It has a lot of capabilities to allow you to grow with that. For the other users that you mentioned, which is, people that have a background, even like Makai, have a background in SolidWorks or Inventor or Pro Engineer, they all kind of work the same. If you work one of those applications, you can jump in the other and actually be very, understand how the system works.
Right.
And to start with a demo, to start with a sketch. And the key thing for those users, if you're all listening, if you're coming to IronCAD, just free your mind. Okay. For example, think in 3D. Think of what you want to do in 3D and use IronCAD in a different process. Don't try to force IronCAD to work the way you used to. Because our default environment is our innovative design environment. So if you're trying to force us to work that way, and you won't get the same results, you just won't, because it doesn't have the damn planes in that environment. It doesn't have your structured orders. It doesn't want it's not really geared to go that route. So think a little bit different. Think in 3D. Let the use of the catalogs, the drag and drop, the push and pull handles, the tri-ball, learn those core foundations, and then start thinking in 3D that you have something in your hand. How would you modify it? Well, I want to move this face. Okay. Well, in IronCAD, you click on that object, you see a handle there. It's on that face. Oh, what do? You pull it. Okay. So think in 3D. Pull those things. Yes, there are sketches behind it. You can modify those. They're there. Don't worry about it. You could still modify those things to get more complex geometry, but a lot of times you just got to think in 3D and how you can add additional shapes or remove shapes to get the results you want, and gives you a little bit more speed in the way you design it versus being very methodical and very long process of drawing out 2D sketches, constraining it to be exactly right, and to extrude this thing, this profile, and then, remove this profile, spin that profile to get something to, it takes a lot of time to do it. Yes, we can do the exact same thing with our structured design. It's there. So keep that in mind if you're coming from those systems. If, we have both those. So we're versatile, right? So if you need to do a parametric model and you want to use our structured design, you can use that to do that type of work. If you want to be a little bit more intuitive and be a little bit faster in what you're doing and designing something, and especially on the bespoke products or conceptualization, the innovative design approach, think in 3D, free your mind. Let this, the system not forcing you to do anything, just keep that in mind. Whereas structured is kind of forcing you to follow a process. It's kind of hard for engineers. We like processes. This is something that's like, you don't have to follow anything. I want feature 1, I want to reference feature 10. In structured systems, when you go back and edit feature 1, everything else in that history goes away. You can't reference that geometry. Okay, that's a structured concept. You can see things above you. You can't see things below you, or use that data below you very well.
Yeah.
In IronCAD's innovative, it doesn't matter. It sees it as geometry. It's there. Use it. Reference it. Okay, so that's something to think a little bit different about your processes in IronCAD. So that's just on the kind of part design side of things. When you get in the assembly design environment, that's where I think anybody that's coming from any different system can easily understand the differences of IronCAD, because you're so flexible in that way. If you want to create assembly, select your objects, hit a button. It's an assembly.
Yeah.
It's assembly. Right. Yeah. Right. If you want to disassemble it, select it, disassemble it. Without saving a file out separately and then deconstructing it or create a new one. We can change that structure rapidly, very fast, very flexible. And that's something that I think any of those traditional users coming to our system quickly see the difference there. Wow. So assembly design, I think there's a lot of power for the transitioning users. And then when you get into the technical drawings and things like that, they're very similar to other applications. So you don't be worried on, can I still create my technical drawings for manufacturing? Yes, IronCAD's got the capabilities. And in fact, we have 2 applications. Again, versatility. You want to use a quick detailing applications, that's our default IronCAD environment. If you want to use a really powerful 2D mechanical CAD application, very similar to maybe AutoCAD's concepts, look and feels, we have that integrated into our product as well. So you can really be very powerful on how you get to the actual detailed drawing side of things, not only what we've been speaking to today is the 3D side of it. We have both.
Wow. That's great. That's great. It seems like when IronCAD, especially with designing, so right, fully being able to actually use that history to your advantage rather than having it hinder you. And then even when it comes to coming into IronCAD, really being able to, I guess, think outside the box and come out and be sketch butt.
I've heard you use that phrase before, Cary. History, is it history based, not history bound, right? Or is it history?
Correct.
Yes,
History based.
history based, not history bound. You're right.
History based. History bound.
Yeah, and I think that's a really easy way for someone to understand it. Someone who's like an active user. I mean, if you're new to CAD and have no idea what history involves, then it wouldn't really affect you. But for the people who are used to history bound CAD software, finding out that CAD is history based, or that IronCAD is history based, not history bound, is a very good selling point, because we just have, it showcases the flexibility that we have. And on a very fun note, IronCAD has been around for 25 years now, which is a remarkable milestone in such a rapidly evolving industry. So how do you reflect on that achievement? What does reaching this anniversary mean to you and the entire IronCAD team?
Yeah, it is a big milestone. I think, from the company IronCAD, yes, we've been around for 25 years plus. The product is around another 2 years. So the product is definitely a very stable product. Yeah, it's a very big milestone for us. I think, it kind of gets back to, from a company standpoint, why are we still around? You have major players that are out there that have big market shares for companies, and how's IronCAD still surviving? Why are we still in the industry? It's like, well, we cater to the industries that we spoke of before, and those users, those concepts, they know the SolidWorks or in the inventors that they can't meet what IronCAD can do in those environments. Once that they've seen IronCAD, they loved it. They came to IronCAD from those applications a lot of times, and they're not in any intent to go back. Okay, so that's why IronCAD has a very strong base, a very loyal base. Anybody that's kind of touched IronCAD for some reason or another, I think it's a similar thing that I felt. I mean, Mackay starting to get that way as well. It's like you start to fall in love with the product. You just, like you said, you can do so much in there. It's so powerful, so simple to do things inside of the product, and that speaks volumes to how IronCAD's evolved over these years, but also how the company's always built around the product. Our whole um, process was to build, the R&D team is the largest part of our company. And that's really to keep enhancing that product and keep enhancing new technology, very innovative technology, making sure it's intuitive to use. Those are the things that we're constantly adding to that product, along with, making sure that we're keeping up with all the detailed functionality things for, like your structured environments and things like that, adding those additional capabilities for versatility. We have to cater to both. So, that's a thing that, the company's always done, is to continue that path. And it's fun to see. It's fun to be here over those 25 years, with the company and being right next to the product. Everybody that we work with, all of our partners that we work with, and it's a very common theme. They all have a very passionate feel about IronCAD. They've got onto the product, they love the product, and they want it to grow. That's always been all of our partners, all of IronCAD, all the employees, all kind of have that similar passion. And it's kind of remarkable for a company to have that. You have, big companies that you don't really feel that from all employees there for a job. A lot of time for IronCAD, we're there to try to make IronCAD more known, more used, more seeing it in more companies, more environments, and things like that. And that's what I love to see, IronCAD growing in this mark for 25 years is really kind of saying, here we are. We've got a very strong base of, many thousands of customers using our product. We have a future for IronCAD. We see that, there's things that we can do to grow that customer base and make it known to other people that are not maybe excelling in their design process, or not, being competitive against their competition. They're not fast enough to market. They're designing the products to market. So that's where IronCAD is going to, kind of continue to grow and excel. So we want people to see, hey, there is a faster way. There's a better way. Take a look at IronCAD. It doesn't have to be your well-known products that are out there. There's other products out there that do the job and do it faster, do it better. Take a look.
Wow.
You answered pretty much what was going to be my next question, which was going to be what your next what your next 25 years looks like, or what the next 25 years of IronCAD looks like to you, and the aspirations that you have for it. But I guess diving a little bit deeper into that, where do you see the platform heading in terms of technology, features, and market presence? If you can give us a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for growth for IronCAD. Just from the market awareness, there's a lot of room for growth in that, and we're, doing these fun activities and new ways to reach out people to understand IronCAD, know that it's out there, and understand the differences of it. I think these platforms are great to really grow that market awareness of IronCAD. But in terms of our product and our strategy, there's a lot of new things coming in. There's always new technology, AIs, new technology. How are those going to fit into the processes of the future? How is that going to change whether it's CAD design, or how's it going to change the way you manufacture your products? There's a whole lot of things that are still kind of unknown. They're all going to play a process in it. So, IRS invested into the AI technology as well for multiple years now. We've been using it and pushing that in the products, and that'll continue. So we'll see new frontiers on that. So how can we make things smarter in the design process? So, a lot of things the AI can do very well is kind of learn, right? So learn what you're doing and improve those processes. And a very kind of a simple example is, taking your 3D content into a 2D environment, your documentation. The documentation is typically similar. You have different products, but you do a lot of the similar things. AI can work really well into learning that technology or learning those processes, and then taking your concepts and giving you, hey, is this what you want from your starting point? Speed up that process, make it faster. And, we want to see that type of new age, more productive processes come into play in the product. So that's AI is just one example. Automation, whether it's coding automation, or even just the way you build intelligence into your products. We're spending a lot of time of giving users the capability to add intelligence to their models in various fashions and ways.
Yeah.
That is not just to help you on building your 3D, but it also is going to start be leveraged to building and automating your processes to 2D, to CAMP, to whatever other process that you use. That intelligence can be used in multiple ways. So that's one of the things I see will continue to grow for IronCAD in that aspect. I also see IronCAD growing in terms of connected applications that will continue to grow, whether it's it's not necessarily AI involved, but you just more integrations for users that our marketplace, what they need, what they want to use the product for, whether it's going into the manufacturing to like CAM applications, tighter integrations into that. Like I said, the intelligence going from 3D, there's a lot of data there. How do you get it into the CAM systems faster, better, to help them manufacture faster? So those type of integrations what I'm talking about is making those processes a little bit stronger and faster for everybody. That's where I see IronCAD kind of growing in the near future.
That's all.
Very exciting.
That sounds really really cool, really fun.
So thank you so much, Cary, for joining us today. We are hopefully going to have you back on here soon to talk about other topics. So we thought that it would be a great idea to get to pick your mind a little bit as we talk about the journey of IronCAD and really just get started on this podcast journey. Thank you so much for your time and for your insight. It's been very insightful.
Yes, thank you so much, Cary, for coming and sharing some of your journey together with us.
Very welcome, and I'll be happy to come back. And there's a lot of knowledge floating around in my head. So
Oh, definitely. We
believe it.
got to pick 25 years worth, right?
Yeah. Makai, I would like to talk to you about a quick tech tip.
Oh yes, please.
Okay.
Sure.
So today's tech tip is on using the new favorites catalog, which just came out which we have in 2025 now, for faster component reuse. So basically, if you have components or features that you find yourself using over and over again, and you wish you could have them all in one place, now you can.
Yes. I know with 2025, it's very easy to use. I think it's the C key, like the keywords,
The hot
the
key.
C key in all the features that you added to your favorites catalog. You can just simply have it right in front of you. So you're actually moving the mouse less, looking back and forth to drag, but it's right there in front of you, so that you're able to, not having to repeat too many steps all at once.
Yes. Continuing to optimize your design process,
Yes.
your design workflow. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to my tech tip.
Thank you so much for the tech tip.
And a quick recap of today's episode. We had an inspiring journey, and we heard from a pillar of IronCAD, Cary O'Connor, who's the Senior Vice President of Product and Strategy. And he told us a lot about how IronCAD stands out and some of the things that IronCAD addresses, and also where we see IronCAD going in the future. Thank you so much, Makai, for coming on this journey
Absolutely.
with me.
Absolutely.
And thank you to all the listeners who are also joining us on the journey to IronCAD. Once again, this is IronCast, the official IronCAD podcast about all things CAD. Have a great one.